Our ministry with NACL has taken us to some very dark places in the inner city of Guadalajara. At first, we noticed how many of the people we befriended on the streets were injured. Girls with bruises and black eyes, guys with bandages and blood-stained clothes, stitches and scars. It didn't really sink in at first that these injuries were the result of aggressive physical violence, but as we got to know people, it clicked. This was a dangerous and violent place. It was kind of a scary connection to make. We reacted with a natural desire to protect ourselves and be safe. So we watched each other's backs, carried pepper spray and a walking stick. I even found a bulletproof vest for $10 at a Goodwill in the States, and actually wore it a few times. Were we being paranoid or just taking reasonable precautions? As we integrated more into the inner city community of homeless drug addicts, prostitutes, and street kids, we got closer to people and heard their stories. We saw their pain, both emotional and physical, and we inevitably became part of some of their stories, a few of which you can read about in these memoirs. I grieve as I write this. We saw it firsthand, over and over again. I watched a girl haul off and punch another girl in the face, knocking her unconscious. A good friend and brother, Alex, had his face smashed in and fractured by another local thug. He is permanently disfigured and blind in one eye. One evening, we're sitting in our mission, singing and praying and talking. Our place was a refuge for folks to come in off the street and take a break from the streets. But it wasn't always a safe place. We tried to keep the drugs and weapons out, but violence still got in. One night, a guy came in and without saying a word bashed one of our friends in the face, knocking him onto the floor. Several of us restrained him and asked him to leave, while others helped our friend up and cleaned up all the blood. My good friend Hector was stabbed repeatedly, but survived with a punctured lung and a splenectomy. He was later abducted again and beaten to within an inch of his life. My friend Abel was stabbed repeatedly right outside our mission over a pair of sunglasses, but he didn't make it. Our friend Brazil lost his life in the gutter with a bullet to the head. My sweet friend Barbie was a local working girl. Her body was found stuffed in a plastic garbage bag behind a pizza place. Everyone knows who did it, but she was murdered a few years later as well. Another young lady we knew was burned alive in an abandoned car where she slept. The match was lit by another young woman we knew well, now doing time for murder. Another guy just got out of prison and went to find his old friends in the inner city. He found them and was beaten to death that very night. My dear friend, Enrique, was dumped from his wheelchair off a bridge and died. Karina and Chava were intentionally poisoned and left to die in the gutter. Nancy was shot in the face but survived. Our friend Alfredo took a bullet in the leg and survived, but was later brutally murdered with a huge rock dropped on his head where he lay sleeping, right next to a Catholic church. These are just a few examples that come to mind. After only a few short years, I had already lost count of how many friends we lost. I stopped counting after around 50. Many died from AIDS and overdoses, but most of them were killed by violence of some kind. Those that managed to survive live someplace between resignation and perpetual fear. I have witnessed some brutal violence and even provided first aid to a few of those affected by it, disinfecting and bandaging up their wounds. But there are wounds and scars that go much deeper than just the physical injuries. In many cases, the worst violence is self-inflicted, not only with drug abuse, but with self-harm due to self-hate. So many people in the inner city are resigned to barely surviving. They have no will to live, so they don't care about their health or hygiene, or if they get AIDS or get hit by a bus or car, or if they live or die. They just exist and engage in increasingly self-destructive behavior, gradually committing suicide. A number of our friends just gave up on trying to cope and survive, and took their own lives. A girl we knew was found in a room dead, hanging by her neck. She either killed herself or it was made to look that way. Another sweet friend cut her own wrists on multiple occasions, but somehow survived. We didn't come to Mexico to play it safe or launch a ministry in the inner city to avoid danger. We intentionally came here, embracing the risk for the sake of the gospel and Christ's kingdom. I always prayed that I would never become insensitive to the suffering of others, but that God would always grant me enough compassion to intentionally intervene and try to help in whatever small way I can. What I didn't realize at the time was how the violence and blood and death were affecting me, taking a gradual toll on my own emotional well-being. But that's a whole nother story for another time. Thank you so much for listening to this true story from Memoirs of Mexico. If you enjoyed this story, or if it was a blessing to you, please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. That would be a blessing to me. I upload a new true story every day. If you like to read, you can also order Memoirs of Mexico in paperback or ebook on Amazon.com. There's a link in the description. Thanks again for listening.